Hi, my name's Keith Arnold with TenPoint and Wicked Ridge Crossbows. So you're looking at buying a new crossbow, and it can be confusing. There's a lot of different models out there and a lot of different price points. I'm going to help explain that to you so that you can make a more informed decision. So first of all, how much crossbow do you need? When it comes to crossbows, crossbows are measured in FPS, or the feet per second. That indicates how fast that crossbow shoots an arrow from it. Virtually all of today's modern crossbows have enough power or energy to harvest any North American game. With that being said, I would definitely stay away from crossbow pistols because they just don't have the power and their arrows are not heavy enough. So again, speaking about crossbows, any modern crossbow is capable of harvesting game. The speeds that they're shooting are pretty much from 350 feet per second, and they can go all the way up to over 500 feet per second. So what does that mean, feet per second? Feet per second is the speed that arrow is traveling when it leaves the bow. And the faster the speed, the flatter the trajectory. And a flatter trajectory is more forgiving if you misestimate how far away that deer is. It gives you a little bit more margin of error. Additionally, higher speed indicates more energy and gives you more penetration on when you have a shot. With that being said, I'll say that most of today's crossbows have plenty of energy for hunting purposes. So one thing to keep in mind when looking at crossbows is the speed range. Once you get into the higher performance crossbows, they definitely require more maintenance. So that's something that you should be aware of, especially if you're a first-time crossbow owner. Now onto the size and the fit of the crossbow. First, I'll say that crossbows are ambidextrous. They're designed to work for left and right-handed shooters, so there's no concern, as there typically would be in firearms, as to if the right and left. When it comes to the size of the crossbow, crossbows will generally fit most individuals. If you're at one end or the other of the height spectrum, that is a place where I would take a look at the length of the crossbow, because it will factor in. For example, someone who's 6'4" may not be comfortable with the most ultra compact crossbow on the market. With that being said, someone of shorter stature would definitely appreciate that. When it comes to the length and the size of the crossbow, as you can see, they can vary significantly, the length and the size. A crossbow, a smaller, more compact crossbow, is definitely an advantage when you're in the field. In the vertical bow world, compact and small is a negative. It impacts shootability negatively. In the crossbow world, it does not have that same effect. So compact, narrowness, shortness is pretty much all benefit, and something that I would certainly consider. So again, there's a ton of options out there. Where you're hunting, if you're in compact ground blinds, if you're a mobile hunter who's packing in their stand, that's an area where you might want to look at a more compact, short crossbow. Whereas if you're hunting out of a ladder stand or a big box blind, you've got some room, so you can go with a little bit longer of a crossbow if you'd like. Another note about the size of the crossbow, as I mentioned, a compact crossbow does provide some additional advantages in terms of handling and carrying, but also when you're in a ground blind or taking a shot where a tree is kind of close, the narrower crossbow allows you to get closer without as much concern of the limb or cam hitting the tree or the ground blind, which would throw your shot off and certainly damage your crossbow. So that's another benefit of the more compact crossbows. When it comes to the mass weight of the crossbow, it really is not that important of a factor. When you look at most bow hunters, they're walking 200, 300 yards to their tree stand. They've got it slung over their shoulder, okay? So if it weighs an extra pound or more, it really doesn't matter in terms of carrying it. And once you get to the stand, it's gonna be hung up. So I wouldn't let the weight, the mass weight of the crossbow, weigh too heavily on your decision. Again, unless if you're doing some long range hunting and you're really carrying a lot of gear, that's where a lighter crossbow might have a greater benefit. But for most individuals that are sitting in a hang-on or a ladder stand or walking to their ground blind, the mass weight of the crossbow isn't going to be a major factor. So we've discussed the speed of crossbows, size of crossbows, and now let's talk about methods of cocking a crossbow. So crossbows can be cocked really two ways. One is by manually using your effort and force to pull the crossbow back. The second is by using a cranking or a cocking mechanism, a winch we'll say, to cock the string back. First, I'll talk about manually cocking a crossbow. So crossbows nowadays pretty much start at 170 pounds and move upwards, can be 300 pounds. At the lower end of the spectrum, some manufacturers offer manual cocking aids, okay? And what that allows you to do is hook a rope sled or a rope device on there, and through the use of pulleys, it reduces the amount of effort down by 50%. So for individuals of average size, we'll say, 5'10" or so, maybe a little shorter on up, you can typically manually cock that crossbow because the weight is not too heavy and you've got enough arm length to go up. At the higher speed crossbow options, higher performance, they all have cranks on them because the weights are too high, plus the bows are too narrow to actually use a rope cocking system. The other option is a crank cocking system. A crank cocking system is extremely easy. Pretty much anyone can cock that crossbow back. They require as little as 5 pounds of effort to cock it. One thing I will say about crank cocking mechanisms is the ones that are integrated into the crossbow are typically favored more because you can't forget your cocking mechanism, and you also don't have to worry about carrying your winch in your backpack. It's not an afterthought. So that's something to consider. One final thing about cocking crossbows. Over the past few years, decocking the crossbow, or the ability to let your crossbow down at the end of the hunt, has come onto the scene. And that's a huge convenience feature because if you go out hunting and don't end up having any action in the field, ultimately it means you need to go back to your truck and shoot an arrow into the ground or bring a target with you to let your crossbow down. The ability to decock or let the string down, be either manually or with a decocking mechanism, has been very well received by the consumer and is a feature you should definitely consider. I will say this, I've yet to meet anyone who has tried a decocking crossbow who didn't end up going in that direction. So it's definitely a trend that we're seeing and something you would want to take a look at. Finally, we'll talk about crossbow optics. So most crossbows, really all crossbows in the market today, are going to come with an optic on them. And they'll work fine for the beginning hunter. The better crossbow scopes offer illumination, allowing you to light up the crosshairs or the aiming points on the crossbow for low light shooting. And the next step up of crossbow scopes allow you to dial in the speed of the crossbow. That way your scope is calibrated to the speed of your crossbow. Finally, the highest end crossbow optics would be a range finding crossbow scope, such as the Burris Oracle X or the Garmin Zero, and these allow for range finding of the target and then provide you with a properly oriented aiming point based on the speed of your crossbow to really take the guesswork out of it. We hope that this has been helpful for you. If you have additional questions, feel free to check us out on TenPointCrossbows.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you in the field hunting.